Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today we are going to be painting some watercolor greeting cards with a summer theme. So I've got this pineapple. So I've done this class before, but this is a brand new design. I love pineapples. So I'm pretty excited about that one. And then we're going to be doing a watermelon.
Okay.
And this isn't going to look exactly like this one, but sort of something like this, a sunflower. And all three cards we're going to do. So when I do greeting cards sort of in a series, I like to make them all sort of similar. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this border around each of our images. In the past, I've done like sort of a wash in the background. So I think we're just going to simplify it a little bit today and do watercolor borders today on each one. So I'm going to switch my camera so you can see my workspace. And I'll just go over the supplies. So today we're going to be using watercolor greeting cards. Now, on the instruction list, I said you could either get, pre-made ones or you can make your own. A lot of times I just make my own by taking a 10 by 7 sheet of watercolor paper and folding it in half. So if you're doing that, that's totally fine. I'm going to be using those, the Strathmore greeting cards. I've got my palette. So we're going to be using a pretty limited palette today, pretty simple. We're going to be using a cool red. I've got a permanent carmine, but you could be using rose madder or alizarin crimson. You could even use a warmer red like cadmium red if you want. Kind of up to you. We're going to be doing that on the watermelon. Burnt sienna, cadmium yellow or lemon yellow, whatever you have that's similar to that. Sap green or hooker's green. And then for our borders, we could use cerulean blue or ultramarine blue or any of the, actually you could use any color you want for the border. I'm going to be demonstrating using one of the blues. And I think those are all the colors we're going to be using today. I've also got a number 6 round brush. You could also use a number 8 or similar size. I've got a number 2 pencil. I've got, and this is sort of optional, but I did put it on the list because I use it on the watermelon. A permanent black felt tip pen, waterproof, and this one is called a Sharpie pen. I've got a drawing compass. So in all of these cards, we're going to be making circles. And I suggested a drawing compass because you can make it different sizes. If you don't have that, we can improvise. You can either draw your circles freehand. You could use like the bottom of your water container or like the bottom of a coffee cup, anything like that. The circles don't have to be the exact size that I'm doing them on here. I've got a ruler. I've got a spray bottle, kneaded eraser. Again, this is optional. I like the kneaded eraser just because it doesn't leave eraser marks on your paper. Now, if you have some salt nearby, I didn't put that on the supply list. It's not required, but if you have some nearby, we could grab that and use it for fun on the sunflower to create some texture. Also, I have some paper towels underneath my palette, and I have a roll off to the side. I've got my water container here, and I think I covered everything. Any questions about supplies? Okay, great. So we're going to get started. We're going to start with the watermelon. So I'm just going to grab one of my cards. I have a brand new box of cards here. For some reason, there was a watercolor greeting card shortage for a while, and I finally got some. So I was making my own for a while. So I'm just going to set this aside over here, and I'm going to open up my card flat like that. Now, you don't have to do that. You can paint on it this way too. I just don't like how this little thing kind of flips up when I'm trying to paint it. I guess the caveat would be try not to get paint on the back, or else you'll have to paint a design on the back to cover up your paint. Ask me how I know. Okay, so this is a pretty simple design, and it's a fun one. And actually, to make the curve on this, we're going to draw this in first, and then we're going to use our ruler to create that triangle shape. And then we'll draw in our border around it. So you can either use your drawing compass to create that sort of half circle, or you can just use your water container. I'll demonstrate using the drawing compass. So we just want, I'll measure it for you so you know if you're using this, it's about, I opened it up to about 1 3/4 inches. So we're going to start, and I'm going to mark where I want the bottom of my watermelon to be. I'm going to mark it about 1.5 inches up from the bottom of the paper. So I'm just going to put a light pencil mark at 1.5 inches from the bottom of the paper. It doesn't have to be right in the center. This is just sort of a point of reference for us. And then I'm just going to put my drawing compass so that the pencil part hits that little mark. And I'm just going to draw a nice little curved line. Alternatively, if you use your water container, just set that on there and draw that kind of little flat smiley face. I don't know if I got mine quite in the center, but that's okay. And then we're going to mark from the top how far we want our watermelon to come down from the top. So I'm going to mark about 1.5 inches. So that's where I want the top of my watermelon to be. And I'm just going to connect that with my ruler. My pencil, I'm going to connect the curved line to where we marked it up at the top. I'm going to hold that up a little bit so you can see. Actually, I'm going to focus this a little bit. There we go. You can see what that looks like. Mine's a little bit messy. So I'm just going to take my eraser and sort of clean up some of these extra little marks. So when we paint this, we're going to try to not paint over the pencil lines. And then we'll just erase them later. So on this one, I'm going to go ahead and put in the border all the way around. So again, we're going to make our border like this card. So I'm going to mark 1 inch in from all 4 sides, just really lightly. We're going to draw these in with the pencil. First, so I've got all my lines marked. I'm just going to draw some really light lines to mark that border because I'm going to want to erase them later. Now this line on the left goes around, or is the watermelon is overlapping the line. Just kind of want what I wanted over here too, but I didn't get my watermelon right in the center. So that's okay. So I just skipped over the watermelon there. I know the lines are kind of light for you to see. Hopefully you can see them well enough. So mine's kind of an off-centered watermelon. Everybody doing okay with that?
Yep.
Good. Now, if you wanted this to be completely centered, we could just adjust these lines a little bit. Like that. And I'm just going to clean up any little extra sort of lines that I have with my eraser here. Because our next step is we are going to paint. All right. Pretty good with that? Okay, I got a thumbs up from BJ.
Okay.
By the way, good morning, BJ. I didn't get a chance to say good morning to you. All right, so we're going to start painting here. So on this one, I used a cool red and then the sap green at the bottom and a tiny little bit of yellow in here. We're going to do a wet and wet technique for this. When it was dry, I went back and put in, I drew in these little seeds and a line underneath with my pen for some nice little details. So I'm going to prepare some red in my palette and some green and a tiny little bit of yellow. Actually, I'll stick this guy over here so you all can see it. So I'm going to spray my palette first. I'm just going to give each one of these paints a little squirt of water. And I'm just going to take some of this cool red and bring it out into my mixing area. I already had some there. But we're just going to mix some of our paint with some water in our mixing area here and prepare it. Because we're going to paint just water in the watermelon shape first, and then we're going to add the paint to it using a wet and wet technique. So I'm also going to prepare some green. So I've got a sap green here, hooker's green works too, or anything similar that you have. And I'm just going to add a little bit of water. We don't want it too watery. We want it kind of more of a darker color. So I've got some green there. And then I need to clean up a little area here for some yellow. And as you can see, no, I don't clean up my palette every single time after I paint. Sometimes I can use those colors again. So I'm going to take some of my yellow here. We don't need a whole lot. Maybe just add just a little bit of water to it. We've got all of our colors prepared there. All right. So I am going to go ahead and start painting here. So I'm going to paint water in this whole watermelon shape. I'm just going to take water from my water container and paint it inside the lines. So I'm going to point my brush toward the lines, and I'm going to try to not get all the way up, touching the pencil lines, because I want to erase them later when it's dry. And if you paint over the pencil lines, you won't be able to erase them. So I'm just sort of carefully painting water over that whole area. Now we don't want like puddles of water. We want it to be sort of like glistening. So let me see if I can hold it up to the camera so you can kind of see, there's like a little reflection there. That's kind of what you want. So nothing's like puddling or running. I've got plenty of water there. And then I'm going to take some of my red and I'm going to start from the top. And I'm going to add that. And I'm just going to carefully go along the edges here, adding that red. And I'm going to stop about an inch from the bottom, give or take. Kind of like about there. You don't have to fill the whole area. But you can just sort of tap your brush and add the red there. And I'm just going to try to get a little bit closer to those lines. Now, if you feel like it's too light, you can just take and dip your brush directly into the paint, which is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to kind of just start from the top and work my way down. I like to start with the edges and sort of work my way in. And then I'm just going to let that sort of blend together. Now, if you feel like your red got a little out of hand down here, you could blot it if you wanted to, or you can just let it do its thing. I'm going to blot just a little bit. on the edge. And then while this is still wet, now if it's not still wet, you can add just a little bit more water. We're going to add some green, starting from the bottom, working our way up. And really all we need is one good brush stroke. So I'm going to start over here on the left, and I'm pointing my brush toward the pencil line. And I'm just going to add that green along the bottom. You might need a little bit more. Mine needs a little bit more. And I like to start light and go darker if I need to. So here it's, to me, that's a little bit light. So I'm going to dip my brush directly in the paint now. And I'm just going to go sort of along that bottom edge and add a little bit more green. Just like that. And I've got some white areas, and I'm just going to leave those because I kind of like it. I like to leave some white spaces to make it look a little more interesting. And then I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of yellow. I'm just going to take a little bit on the tip of my brush. I'm just going to add a couple little bits here and there, right where the green sort of meets the red. I'll hold that up a little bit closer so you can see what I did. Now it looks like dots right now, but I think it's going to blend in to each other pretty well. Everybody doing okay with that? Good. All right, so for our last step, we're going to do the border. And I've got an ultramarine blue here. I'll take some of that out into my mixing area here and add just a little bit of water to it. Cerulean blue would be really great for this too. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to paint along the pencil line, but I'm not going to paint over the pencil line. So I'm just going to paint sort of up to it with the tip of my brush. So I'm just going to pull my brush sort of along that pencil line. And I'm sort of moving my whole arm. You might have to turn your card like this. I'm just sort of pulling the brush right along there, pointing it towards the pencil line, but not touching it. I'm I'm just painting on the outside of that line. Now, if you had a smaller brush and you feel more comfortable with a smaller brush, you could use that too. I kind of like the thicker line myself. And I'm just going back here and just sort of cleaning that up a little bit. You can add a little bit darker paint towards the corners or anywhere you think it needs it.
Is there a trick to trying to keep your line the same width or size?
Well, the trick that I use is I just sort of try to keep the same pressure
Okay.
on my brush and sort of move. I just sort of move my whole arm. So I don't know if you can see that. Maybe if I move this up a little bit. I sort of don't try to like add or release any pressure to the brush and sort of use the tip of the brush and just pull. So instead of moving my wrist like this, I'm pulling my whole arm.
Okay. And then the pressure as well.
And the pressure is the same, yeah. So try to keep the pressure the same. Don't push down or lift up on the brush.
That did make a difference. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's not a perfect line. You know, I don't want to, I kind of like it a little bit, you know, watercolory rather than perfect. Sandy just laughs.
Well, it's not perfect.
we're going for art here, not perfection. If we wanted perfection, we would just take a picture of it.
I've got super art then. Okay.
Okay, so I know this one looks kind of rough, but we're going to let it dry. And when we go back after it's dry, we're going to add these little seeds and a little finishing line under here. And that's the magic that's going to make it look like a watermelon. And we're going to erase our pencil lines. So don't give up quite yet. I'll leave that here for another minute for those who are finishing up. So we're going to go on to our next card and we'll come back to this one at the end. Okay, so I'm going to set this one aside. And the next one we're going to do is going to be our sunflower. No, we're going to do the pineapple because we have to come back to that one at the end and erase the lines when it's dry. So we're going to do this one next. So the process for this one, we're going to draw a circle first, so we get the main shape of our pineapple. And then we're going to elongate that into sort of an oblong shape. And then we're going to draw crisscrossing lines to create these little sections. And then we're going to draw our leaf shapes, and then we'll draw the border around that. So I'm going to take my drawing compass, and I'm going to try to get this one in the middle this time. So we're going to measure 2.5 inches up from the bottom. Just put a dot there. And 2.5 inches from the side, either side, because it's 5 inches. So we basically just kind of want a dot in the middle there. That's going to be the starting point for our circle. And then if you're using a drawing compass, we want to go make it 1.25 inches, give or take. And draw a circle. If you don't have a drawing compass, it would be like maybe coffee cup size, water cup size. Basically a 2.5 inch circle. Everybody doing okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay, so from our circle, I'm going to have you just make a little dot 1/4 inch above it and about 1/2 inch below it. Let me hold that up so you can see. So I just marked it up here, 1/4 inch and about 1/2 inch below it. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to sort of elongate this circle. It's kind of like a flatter bottom up to those points. If you wanted to use some sort of a cup or template for that, you could, but I think don't worry too much about that being super perfect. And then once you have that, you can erase that circle in the middle and the dot. And I'm just using pretty light lines. I'm drawing them a little bit darker so you all can see. But for you, I would recommend make them pretty light so it's easy to erase later. All right, everybody good with that? All right, good. So we're going to make these little crisscrossing lines here. And so I'm just going to draw some lines like this. Now, don't worry too much about getting these perfect. I'm curving them just a tiny little bit. And I kind of started from the middle of the top and went to the right. And I'm going to do the same thing going to the left. So I'm going to start at the middle top. And now I'm going to make some crisscrossing lines to the left. And again, I'm just slightly curving them. And I would say, if you want to get precise about it, they're, about 1 inch apart, but I'm not measuring. We don't need them to be like super perfect. So this is going to give us sort of a guideline in which to paint our little sections here. We're going to erase all these lines at the end when it's dry. Okay? Good. All right. So now we're going to draw our leaves up here. And we're going to do kind of a similar thing. We're going to draw some shapes that are going to help us paint these leaves in. So we're going to start with a diamond shape right on the top. And again, I would try to make these kind of light lines. Mine are going to be a little bit darker so that you can see them. So we're starting with a diamond shape. And then I'm going to draw two little curved lines on either side of that. So just like that. Coming from the side of the diamond. And then I'm going to draw two more, a little bit longer, coming from the top of the diamond. Nice little curved lines. Okay. Then I'm going to draw one. It's going to start right about here on the right hand line we just drew. And we're going to draw that one curving up like that. And then we're going to draw one sort of right, if you would stop or start at the top of the diamond and go directly up, that's the point at which we're going to start the next line, going out to the right. Another little curved line. And then we're going to start in a similar place as we did down here with this line. I'm going to draw another one coming up like that. And at this point, I'm making this line a little bit shorter than these lines. So we've got kind of short, long, long, and then a shorter one. And then one more starting about here, like sort of straight up from that diamond, about the same length as that one. Oops, sorry about that. I'm going to hold it up so that you can see the lines. And then at the top, we're going to draw another diamond. So I'm going to just use these lines. I'm going to draw another diamond like that. And then from each side, the middle of each side of this diamond, I'm just going to draw one little curved line on each side. So basically, we just made the tops of all of our leaves. And now we're going to work our way down and make the bottom of the leaves, which is the easier part. So everybody good up to this point? Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so we're going to work our way down. So I'm going to start with this line that I just drew, and I'm going to connect it where this diamond meets the top of this line. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And this is going to be the same process all the way down. So I'm going to take this line and I'm going to connect it sort of not in the corner, but a little ways up the leaf here. So kind of like about there. And don't worry if yours looks a little bit different. Every pineapple is different. So I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm just going to draw a nice little curved line down to the top of this leaf here. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to take the end of this leaf and I'm going to draw a nice little curved line about down to there. Yours might end in a different place, and that's fine. Same thing over here. I'm just going to draw a nice little curved line here. Let me do this. Draw this one about halfway, connecting it about in the middle of this line here. Same thing over here. Nice little curved line ending about in the middle of that smaller line. And I'm going to take this one and I'm going to connect it down to the top of the pineapple. Same thing on that side. Fun, huh?
Yeah. It really looks like a pineapple.
And your leaves might be, you know, bigger or smaller. I drew these a little bit darker than I normally would just so you could see it. But we're going to paint inside all of those shapes and then erase the pencil lines. Now, you know, you don't have to erase the pencil lines on this stuff, but to make it look like this with the white spaces in between, that's what we'll do. Okay, now the painting on this one is fairly easy. I'll give you a minute just to finish up that drawing. Yeah, it took me a couple tries to come up with the exact process for drawing those leaves to make them look like they're overlapping. So the colors we're going to be using here are yellow, and I've got a cadmium yellow, burnt sienna, and your sap green, and whatever blue you're using. So when I do a series of cards, I usually try to make the borders a similar color, but you don't have to. For these, I'm all going to use the same blue. This, I think I used a cerulean blue here, which is kind of nice with the tropical theme. Oh, we have to put our border in. Almost missed that step. So again, we're just going to draw a 1-inch border all the way around. Now, if your ruler is 1 inch wide, you could just use your ruler as the guideline also to make it easier on yourself. So I'm just going to draw this border up to the pineapple, but not overlapping it. Same thing on the sides. We're going to have some leaves that kind of go over our border. So I'm just skipping over those as I draw the border. going to set this guy aside just for a second. My ruler isn't exactly an inch wide, but it's close enough. I'm just going to clean up any extra lines I have here. So I heard from 2 different people in the last week when I told them we were doing pineapples today, that pineapple is the symbol of hospitality. So I didn't know that, but a lot of people do know that. All right, everybody doing okay with that? Good. So I'm going to prepare some paint in my mixing area. I'll bring this guy back over here. Oh, sorry about that. My camera is easily hit by me. I'm going to mix some of my yellow with some water. And I really like this cadmium yellow for it because it's nice and bright. And I'm also going to mix a little bit of burnt sienna with some water. So I went around the edges a little bit with the burnt sienna just to add some depth. I'm just going to get a little puddle of burnt sienna there. So we're going to do kind of a wet and wet there, but we're not starting with water. We're just going to start with the yellow in each section. So I'm just going to sort of work my way down. I'm going to grab some yellow on my brush, and I am going to paint inside each section, not painting over the pencil lines. So I'm just sort of using the tip of my brush in these smaller sections, adding some yellow, and I'm going to do 2 or 3 at a time. And I just did what I told you to not do, which was paint over the pencil line. That's okay. So I've got 2 or 3 painted yellow. I'm just going to wash my brush and then grab some of my burnt sienna and just add a little bit of that around the edges. So I'm just sort of using the tip of my brush there and adding that around the edges. I'll wash my brush and I'm going to move on to painting yellow in some more sections. So I'll do maybe 4 sections here at a time, and then add my burnt sienna while they're still wet. So again, I'm just taking this burnt sienna and kind of going around the edges. If it doesn't stay on the edge, it's totally fine. it just kind of adds that little bit of depth we need. So you can see on this one, a lot of them just kind of bled together, but I kind of like that myself, them to all be a little bit different. Now you might notice you need to bring a little bit more yellow into your mixing area if you're running out. That's what I'm doing right now. And I'm just going to continue on. If you get to a small little section, you can kind of just use the tip, very tip of your brush. I kind of hold my brush more straight up and down to get to those sections. And I like to kind of go around the edges first and then fill in the middle. And again, I'm pointing my brush sort of toward the edges, and that just gives you a little bit more control over how far the paint goes. So there I've got multiple sections painted. I'm going to come back in here with my burnt sienna and just add a little bit of that. Now these paintings, I think especially this one, I mean, you could just paint this on 5x7 piece of watercolor paper and make this an actual little painting that you could use and mat it and frame it. Give it away as a gift. Decorate your house with it. You can do that with any of these, obviously. You can make a whole like little series of small paintings that go together. So they don't have to be limited just to cards. Bring a little bit more burnt sienna out here. If you have other colors in your palette, quinacridone gold would be a really great one for this too, especially for the areas where I'm adding the burnt sienna. So I'm just sort of working my way down here. I do like 4 sections here. And then go back and add my burnt sienna. I'm at the gallery right now, and the air seems to be always really dry in here. So everything dries super fast. I gotta work fast.
Huh.
Obviously, lots of different ways you could draw and paint a pineapple. This is a really simplified version. What's everybody doing with that? Looks like you're working very intently. Take a few more minutes here for the that part of it.
Oops.
Then we'll move on to the leaves and then we'll finish with our border. I did this painting a couple times just to sort of work out the steps, and it turned out different every time. As you can see already, like this pineapple is much more longer. This one's much rounder. That's just what happens. Like I can never exactly duplicate any painting. They kind of take on a life of their own.
Okay, stop.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the leaves. I'm going to take some of my green. I already have some in my mixing area here, but this is the sap green. I also have Hooker's green here. They're very similar. I'm just going to use this sap green. Either one you want to use is totally fine. And really all we're doing for the leaves is just painting the green inside those sections. I did add a little bit darker paint sort of inside just for some depth, but really all we're doing, I'm going to start at the top actually. I'm just going to use the tip of my brush here just to paint in these sections. If you have a smaller brush and you feel more comfortable using the smaller brush, that's totally fine. And again, you can see I'm avoiding the pencil lines there because I want those white spaces when I'm done and when I erase all the pencil lines. I'm just sort of working my way down here. Nothing fancy. If you hold your brush a little bit more straight up and down, kind of helps when you get to the ends. And I'm not even going like all the way out there just because I don't want to hit that pencil line. Because the shapes we drew are just sort of like a container for where we want the paint to go. We could have done these leaves without drawing first, but I think that would be a little bit challenging.
Cue the laugh track, please. Yeah, so I think I made the right decision. Sounds like. And don't worry if it's not looking too perfect. If you look over here at this one, those edges are not completely perfect. So don't worry too much about it. Now at this point, you could dip your brush in the green and sort of just add a little bit of darkness here, sort of on the inside and just let that blend. See, mine's already kind of drying, so you gotta do it fast. It's not necessary though if you don't want to. Just sort of paint it in and leave it. And if it feels like I'm moving too fast, it's just because I'm trying to keep on time here so we can end on time. And you will have the video and some instructions later if you don't finish all of these sections and we move on. You can just, I'm not going to say homework because I don't like homework, but you can have a nice little fun, relaxing project to finish up later.
Ooh, oops, 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 oops.
So that's really all I'm going to do there. I'm just going to add a little bit, maybe a little bit more green right at the bottom. This one, I left a lot more white space. So if you're doing that, that's totally fine. If you're trying to stay away from those pencil lines, I probably could have left a little bit more in here. All right, I'm going to keep moving. So if you're not quite done with that part, you can finish it later. We're just going to paint in the border, and it's going to be the exact same process we did with the watermelon. So I'm going to take my blue, and again, I'm just using the ultramarine blue, but cerulean or cobalt blue. You can even mix a little bit of green in with this blue and make it blue-green if you wanted to. Those would all work. So I'm just going to go along this pencil line again and just pulling the brush, not touching the pencil line. I'm going to pull it right up to the bottom of that leaf and then just sort of skip over it. So I'll hold it up a little bit so you can see I'm leaving a little bit of space between the blue and the pencil line so that I can make sure that I can erase it later. Now I'm going to skip the whole top of the pineapple here. I didn't try to like draw border in between those little spaces. And then again, I'm just keeping the same pressure and moving my whole arm as I pull the brush there.
Oh, it's just
Everybody doing okay with that? Okay, great. Take a couple more minutes and then we're going to move on to our sunflower. I'm going to get another card out here. Okay, I'm going to set this guy aside now. Let that dry. Okay, so I'm going to move on to sunflower. Got a new card here. And I'm going to try to make the sunflower sort of in the middle of the card. So I'm just going to measure down 3.5 inches and add a dot. And then again, 2.5 inches. Wow, that was lucky. Got it right on. So that's going to be sort of the center of the sunflower, that dot right there. And then as far as like the middle of the sunflower, I've done some that are bigger and some are smaller. So I've done some like this where it's got a really big middle, and then this one where it's kind of smaller. And this, everyone calls this a sunflower, but this is actually a daisy. But it's sort of known as the sunflower. So we're going to start with a circle. If you want a smaller one, you could use like your spray bottle. If you want a larger one, you could use your water cup or your drawing compass. I'll probably just use my drawing compass and probably like open this up like about an inch. But feel free to make it smaller or larger, depending on what you want it to look like. I'm going to start with this circle. Now we're going to do this one a little bit differently. We are going to paint the middle of the flower first, and then we're going to paint the petals. We're not going to draw them.
Uh-oh.
You can do it. You can do it. And I'm going to erase this dot. We're just going to paint. If you want, you can draw them out. I can demonstrate drawing them. I heard some nervousness in the background, so maybe we'll draw the petals.
Actually, I'm okay with doing it because it's kind of like the toll painting from years
okay.
ago. So if I was the only one giggling, I'm okay with it.
Okay, good. So we'll do that. It's good to stretch yourself and do a little bit of freehand stuff sometimes. So we're going to do that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we've got our circle here. We're going to paint our circle. We'll paint our petals, and then we'll draw the border in around the petals. The reason I like to do that is because sometimes the petals take on a life of their own, and we don't exactly know where to put the border just yet. So we are going to add some burnt sienna. One color I didn't go over, and I don't remember if I put on the supply list, was Payne's Gray. Does everyone have Payne's Gray?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, good. So we're going to use some Payne's Gray also. So I'm going to start with some burnt sienna. We're going to pull this out into the mixing area. If you don't have Payne's Gray, you can use a little bit of the blue. That will also work. We're just going to add a little darkness.
Hello? Can you explain the two colors again that make Payne's Gray?
Burnt sienna and ultramarine blue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if you want to mix it, you can mix burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, but we don't need to mix it on the palette. We can just mix it on the painting.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So I'm just going to take and paint inside my circle here. And I'm painting all the way up to these pencil lines. Doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm just going to add a little bit more around the edges. And then I'm going to add a little bit. I'll show you both options, actually. A little bit of Payne's Gray around the edge. Just for some nice darkness. Now, if you just only have blue, that's fine. I'll show you what that looks like. It's just going to mix in with the burnt sienna. So I'm just kind of going around the edge. I might add a few little dots here and there. But it actually sort of mixes in and it makes that gray right on the paper. Now, if you have salt, you can add a little bit of salt for texture. I'm just going to sprinkle some in my hand. And then add a few little granules too where the paint is still wet. If you don't have salt, that's fine too. And that's pretty much the middle. Everybody doing okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to the petals here. So I'm just going to start with some cadmium yellow. I'm going to go kind of like clockwise here with the petals. We'll start with yellow and then we'll just layer a little bit of burnt sienna over the top for some depth. Now for the petals, all I'm going to do is use some nice brush strokes here. Just like that. So I'm sort of starting at the middle and I'm pushing down on my brush and then I'm letting up on the pressure a little bit to use the tip of my brush for the end of that petal. Just like that. It's really good to know how to just make shapes with your brush rather than having to draw everything out all the time. So I'm just going to go around and make these petal shapes all the way around. And you can make them longer or shorter, whatever looks good to you. I'm kind of touching it to the center. As I go. If it bleeds into the petals when you do that, that's totally fine. So again, I'm sort of pushing my brush down and then I'm letting up on the pressure just to use the tip of my brush at the very end of the petal. You might have to bring a little bit more paint out into your mixing area. And sometimes I like to leave a little bit of white inside the petals. And you can alternate the length of the petals if you want to. Just pushing down and then letting up as I go. And if you need to turn your card to make it easier, then just do that. Now, if you find that your cards are slightly warped when you're done, they're not completely flat. What I do is I take the card and I sort of spray a little bit of water with my spray bottle, put some wax paper inside and on the top. And you would do this when your card is completely dry. So you're only spraying a little bit of water inside, wax paper inside, wax paper on top, and then put a heavy book on it for a day or so. And they usually flatten out pretty well. So by the time I get to the top here, these petals have already started to dry. Just enough so that we can add a little bit of burnt sienna over the top. So we're going to do what's called glazing. I'm going to start with the one that I painted first, which is this one right here. It's dry. I'm just going to do this with some burnt sienna. So I'm going to start sort of at the base, and I'm just going to use the tip of my brush to just sort of pull some of that burnt sienna into the petal. So just making some little brush strokes and defining those petals a little bit more. Maybe I don't want it that dark. Let's see. I'm just going to kind of go around. Kind of holding my brush straight up and down. Just to give those petals a little bit more depth, definition. A blot, I got a little bit too much there. I'm going to just blot that. So I just, if you get too much paint, you can blot your brush and kind of go back and pick it up. So I'm just working my way around. Turn your card if that makes it easier for you. If you want smaller brush strokes, just use more of the tip of your brush. If you have a smaller brush, you could use that too. The thing about using a smaller brush is I think it sort of makes your brain think you have to be like really detailed with it. So I kind of like to use the bigger brush because I can tend to get too detailed with things. And we kind of want like a looser look here for our flower. So we got some burnt sienna there. If you wanted to add just a little bit more darkness, just to make it blend in with the center of the flower, you could take some of your burnt sienna. I'm going to bring this out into the mixing area and add just a little bit of blue. You could use Payne's Gray too. I'll show it using blue, the ultramarine blue. It's going to get a little bit of that and add it to my burnt sienna over here. It's going to make it like a darker brown. And then you could just kind of go right at the base of each like little petal here and add just a little bit more darkness. We don't want to overdo it. But just sort of like blend in that transition between the middle. And if it looks too dark, don't worry. It's going to dry lighter than it looks when it's wet. And then our last step with this card, and I realize you might not be completely done, but I'm going to keep moving. So we're going to draw in our border and paint it. Can always add just a little bit more of that to the center of the flower just to blend it a little bit. I think that's pretty good. So if you're not done with your petals, you can finish them later. And I'm just going to draw my border in. Again, I'm kind of shooting for about a 1-inch border. Yours could be different if you want. I'm just going to go kind of up to the flower and then skip over all of those petals there and continue the border on the other side. Doing that all the way around here. I'm just going to connect these two. clean up any extra lines I have here. And then I'm going to use the blue. Again, ultramarine blue is what I have here. I'm just going to go around that border outside the pencil line. Tip of my brush, sort of moving my whole arm here. Right up to the petals, but not touching them. And that's all there is to that one. If you did put salt on there, you're going to want to wait till the middle part is dry and then brush the salt off. So I'm going to set this one aside. If you're not quite done, you can finish it later. I'm going to bring the watermelon back here. This is all dry. So I'm just going to erase all those pencil lines. Just make sure your painting is completely dry before you do this so you don't smudge any of your paint. And I'm using a kneaded eraser, but you could use any kind. And then I'm just going to take my pen and I'm going to make some seeds. So I make like 7 or so seeds. So I'm just going to draw some little, kind of like little teardrop shapes in here. And this is the thing that just like really finishes this, I think, and makes it look like a watermelon. And I'm going to do 7 just because I like that number, but you could do whatever amount you want. And then if you want, you can also add a line using your pen right underneath. Totally optional. Just gives it a little tiny bit of definition. And then don't forget to sign it. I like to sign it sort of somewhere inside the composition myself. And that's all it is there is to that card. The pineapple card should also be dry at this point. So the only thing left to do here is just erase and just make sure it is, because you don't want to smudge anything, but you can go right over everything with your eraser. Just erase all those pencil lines. Now, alternatively, you could go over all the pencil lines with a pen. That would look pretty cool too. Now I drew my pencil lines a little bit darker, so it might be a little bit harder to erase them if you did that. I think these are coming off pretty good. If you have trouble, I recommend one of those pen erasers. So one of the white and gray ones that has the gray side that's more abrasive. So if you find you have some stubborn pencil lines, you can use that. You just have to not scrub it too much because then you'll sort of take up the paper with it, which you don't want to do. This pen eraser is also handy if you get like some paint in a place that you don't want it. Like I got a little spot of green right here. So sometimes you can scrub that off with this pen eraser. It actually looks like it's coming off pretty good. So you can get off any little errant paint dots. And you can get these just at the dollar store, these pen erasers. Really handy for this kind of thing. There's our finished pineapple. And once you finish your sunflower, if you haven't already, the only thing to do would be to erase that pencil line inside the border there. How's everybody doing with that? I'll take the silence as you're doing okay. Okay, so I am going to switch my camera back. Anybody have any questions before we end? All right,
I have
so
a quick question. Sorry.
yeah, go
Do
ahead.
you have like a special type of pencil that you use or anything?
I don't. Well, it's special to me, but it's not really special. So actually, let me switch back here and I can show it to you a little bit easier. I use these Papermate Sharp Writer. So this is not even like a drawing pencil, but it's a #2 pencil and it's a mechanical pencil. So you can turn it and get, more lead out. I don't like sharpening pencils. And these these are like just the right softness for drawing is what I have found. And
Okay.
so, yeah, they're not refillable. That's the only downside to these, but it's got a good eraser. It's like the right size of lead and everything. And you can get them like anywhere,
Nice. Yeah, it looks familiar.
Yeah. Papermate Sharp Writer. So I can send that out in the email with the instructions.
And do you know if it matters like what type of salt you use?
Well, we had a
Side
discussion
effects?
about that last time. So it seems like regular table salt works the best. So I know BJ and one of our other students tried the Himalayan pink salt last time and it didn't work as well. So it seems like just regular table salt, cheap salt.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was really fun. Thank you.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So I'm recording this. It takes me a while to edit it. So usually I get it sent out like later on today or tomorrow. And I'll also send out some step-by-step instructions too later. And anytime you have any questions, you can just send me an email. I'm happy to respond. I am trying to not be on the computer on Sundays, just because I am like the whole rest of the week. So if I don't respond until Monday, that is why. So at least give me until Monday.
That's fair.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
thanks
Thank you.
everyone. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you being here. And again, if you have any questions, just send me an email and
Okay.
hope to see you soon. Have a great Father's Day weekend.